Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palumba. Now, as you can see, I am still in my office, but I have a beautiful new background, courtesy of University of Virginia, which is the next place I will be teaching at this upcoming fall. I'm very, very excited to be at the Darden School of Business at University of Virginia. It has been nothing short of a dream come true to be at a top 10 business school. And, the path has been very, very difficult. 2 years ago at this time, I was still teaching at a community college. And I had received an offer from St. John's University in Queens, New York, to come on full-time as an assistant professor. And to be able to move on from that to the University of Virginia is a major, you can see that I'm speechless. It's a major step in my career, and it's also been very humbling. With so many people unemployed, with the riots that are going on and protests that are going on, and the economy that has been all over the place, it's very humbling to be part of the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, and I am very, very eager to make them proud. And so this background is something that they're offering for faculty members as we go into the fall, teaching online and teaching hybrid classes for that matter. Today, what we're going to be looking at is a former study, a study that is currently actually under review, but it is related to the last video. Last video, we looked at how consumer personalities, lifestyles, and demographics might be able to predict consumer behavior when it comes to movie genre consumption and movie platform consumption. Genre consumption being action, superhero, comedy movies, and platform consumption surrounding tablets, smartphones, smart TVs, and other technological devices. Today, we're going to be looking at how actors, directors, producers pull us to the box office. So this is in a way in which kind of reverse engineering and looking at how consumers are brought to movies. And when we think about this, we might say to ourselves, well, I really like comedies. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is hysterical. And so I am going to go after this particular movie that is coming up. And so we make our decisions based around genres. As soon as we go to the movie theater and we have a movie in mind that we want to see, the box office draw is partially interesting because of the creatives involved. And so when we think about ingredient branding, when we think about how creatives, putting Leo DiCaprio in a movie, then putting Steven Spielberg, these creatives, they're brands. They're brands that are identifiable, and it's so much so that in Hollywood, it's very typical to have something called a holding contract, in which if I'm developing a television show or movie, I can hold a celebrity for a period of time. So I can tell Will Smith, I need you to be free from June 2022 to July 2022. And I have to pay him either way. If the TV show or movie gets made or if it doesn't get made, I have to pay him for his time. But this is to illustrate that these brands, these creative brands, serve as a way to add equity, added value to a movie. And so with the exorbitant salaries that creatives are given, my question was, is it worth it? Do creatives really push and motivate people to see particular movies? And so that's kind of what this study takes a look at, whether or not creatives really are valuable, really do predict people seeing these movies. So the name of the study here is Ingredient Branding at the Box Office, How Creative Genre Fit and Familiarity Predict Movie Theater Attendance. So this study came about when I was reading something in the Atlantic. And so this is, based around Richard Morawski, who is a film consultant. he suggested in this article that it's important to reverse engineer a film's intrigue to audiences. And now we know that past studies have typically looked at predicting box office receipts. Can we predict how people will respond to a movie via movie ticket sales? Can we predict movie ticket sales? Can we predict, interest or inclination to go see a movie? And this has been done in a whole slew of ways. Anita Elbers, who's a very, very prominent entertainment scholar at Harvard Business School, looked at the Hollywood Stock Exchange, and the way that she measured consumer interest in seeing a movie was measuring actors dropping on or dropping off from projects, almost kind of like a stepwise regression or hierarchical regression for those of you who are familiar with multivariate stats. Joshi also looked at actors reducing risk at the box office. So he looked at whether or not adding actors to a particular endeavor or creative enterprise could reduce risk at the box office. But there's been no consideration of genre fit or creative brand familiarity. So, for instance, our Chris Pratt here, would he fit in a horror movie? Would he fit in an action movie? Probably an action movie, more so than a horror movie. So genre fit is something else that has not been considered in the past, but is something that is very, very relevant to putting together a movie. We think about the actors and actresses who might be stretching and might be going into different roles. We might say, well, why is he going into this? Why is Channing Tatum going into a drama? Or why is Steve Carell going into a drama? We have these conversations all the time. Additionally, we also have creative brand familiarity. How many movies have you seen with these actors and actresses? Where it's important to measure for how familiar consumers are with actors and actresses before they're able to rate whether or not celebrities fit in a particular genre. So I wanted to capture both here because it's important for participants in this study who had taken a survey to be familiar with creatives so that they could evaluate whether or not these creatives fit in certain genres. So theoretical framework here, ingredient branding. So this deals with slot filler expansions. An ingredient brand fills an existing slot attribute of a host category. So it's kind of a co-branding, right? Irish Spring Scent fits in Tide detergent. Robert Downey Jr. slot filler fills in for the Avengers movies series. And that is the host. So the goal here is that to maximize transfer of information from brands to products, brands must have a high degree of product level fit with the extension product. And this inherently creates creative brand associations. So it's important to understand how important these creatives are, these slot fillers are, that influence the movie brand itself and also product, the movie consumption experience. Variables. So you're already familiar with creative brand familiarity. I haven't heard of him or her, that director, actor, or producer that's involved. And 5, I have seen several movies in which he or she is in or has worked on. With genres, we have, I've never watched through 5, I watch all the time. Conceptual previous familiarity with a celebrity, I haven't heard of him, her. I have seen several movies in which he or she has worked on. So this is, again, a reason why to have this is to provide a conceptual previous familiarity with a celebrity. This is why I have the creative brand familiarity here. Perceived genre, celebrity fit. 1 does not go together. 5 goes together. So 5, Will Smith goes with a horror movie. Or 1, Will Smith does not go with a science fiction movie. For Box Office Mojo, I looked at the top 10 list of actors and actresses, and I also looked at the top people in Hollywood. And so I looked at these lists to determine who I wanted to incorporate in this study. And so the method here was that I earned a CUNY grant that funded this. I secured a national randomized sample through Qualtrics, and there was a filter question. The filter question asked if consumers had watched at least one movie per week to be incorporated in the study. I wanted to analyze specifically frequent moviegoers because I wanted to look at a population or a sampled population that was very much familiar with movies and was very much familiar with actors and actresses and which ones would fit in genres and which ones wouldn't fit in particular genres. So after the pre-testing of the survey in Mechanical Turk, I had 301 participants left after data cleaning for the national survey. So the national survey, I surveyed about 400 people. And from there, after data cleaning, 301 people were left over. And the 99 people that were removed were people who did not complete the survey itself. Descriptive results, so the gender split itself was about 50-50, 60% Caucasian, African Americans 12%, Asian Americans 5%, Hispanic Americans 13%. And the breakdown of how often people viewed movies was pretty spread out, 22% once a day, 57% a few times a week, 20% once a day. So a TURF analysis was done here first. The TURF analysis was meant to understand if there's an optimal portfolio of creatives that can be put together. So it's this idea that creatives can add added equity by being a part of something. So if we think about a movie and we think about Martin Scorsese as the director, J.J. Abrams as the producer, Chris Pratt or Robert Downey Jr. as an actor, Jennifer Lawrence as the actress, right? We're putting in ingredients further and further. So what's important here is to not just look at creative brands, but to look at incremental equity that has been added here. So it allows researchers to understand the amount of distinct consumers who will seek out their favorite product items, and it also minimizes overlap. To investigate how consumers perceive potential collaborations among some of the most widely renowned creatives. So the idea here is to see, is there an optimal blend? From the list of creatives that I have, is there an optimal blend for a movie? So what was used here for the TURF analysis was creative brand familiarity. It indicated how familiar creatives or consumers were with each creative. So as we can see here, and we have the research question below, based on consumer inclination to see celebrities in movies, are there ideal celebrity collaborations? Are there ideal celebrity collaborations before we think about genre fit, before we think about whether or not creatives predict people going to the movies? Are there particular fits here? Are there particularly ideal collaborations? And here, as you can see, Judd Apatow with Chris Nolan, with Amy Adams, with Ridley Scott, with Chris Evans is a very notable creative cast to be involved in any kind of movie. But what you can see here is that the reach increases precipitously. It increases quite notably. And so you can see here the reach is how many people are reached, and then you have the frequency here on the column second to the right. And so the reach discusses how many participants are reached from these creatives, and then with frequency, we're talking about how many times the participants may be exposed to these particular creatives. And so again, we can see here that it goes on and on and on through Chris Pratt, through Emma Stone, through J.J. Abrams. But the takeaway here is that there are creatives that really can reach a lot of people and are consistently exposed to a lot of people. So it's not just reaching 174 people, but it's having the 492 amount of individual times in which people are exposed to that particular creative. So this goes through 10. Now, obviously, if we're looking at this, it's likely that the first 3 or 4 make sense. So to have Chris Apatow Judd Apatow, Christopher Nolan, Amy Adams, Ridley Scott. And what you'll notice here is that directors and producers really do make up the top of the list, which is notable. We know that actors and actresses are kind of at the bottom of the list, but for J.J. Abrams. But with Judd Apatow, Christopher Nolan, and Ridley Scott, the argument is here that you can kind of see that directors and producers probably reach more people than actors and actresses. And the frequency with which consumers are exposed might be more with directors and producers than actors and actresses. So it's something to consider when a movie is putting together a portfolio of creatives. What we also have here is the second research question that I asked: does previous brand familiarity with creative celebrities impact consumer inclination to see a movie? If so, how? So what I was trying to test here is what's predictive of people going to a movie in a conceptual sense. So in this question, I didn't ask people whether or not they were familiar with anybody. What I asked people was, conceptually, if you had to think about it, what would spur you to go see movies on a monthly basis, right? Going to see movies once a month at movie theaters. And so here, it wasn't previous familiarity with an actor or a producer or a writer. It was really directors and characters. And characters are very, very big right now. As we know, with a lot of superhero sequels and a lot of action sequels, being familiar with Spider-Man, Batman, any of these kinds of characters lends themselves to multiple installations of a series, and therefore spurring people to see these movies. Batman is coming back, and there will be a new actor in Batman. And so, as much as people may like the particular actor, it's more important for many people that it's Batman. And with directors, with Quentin Tarantino, with J.J. Abrams or Steven Spielberg, a lot of these directors have different styles that are very, very different from the norm of a lot of other directors. And so there might be some sort of distinctness that can really spur people to go see a movie. So again, we're not really seeing actors here as pushing the envelope for people to see movies, at least insofar as having familiarity is concerned. Do consumers have expectations of what genres celebrities best fit in? And they do. And so we can see here, again, this is from the list, I've highlighted the actors that have the highest ratings for each genre here. Robert Downey Jr., we can see mystery. Will Smith, comedy. Christopher Evans, science, horror, fantasy, and superhero. Mark Wahlberg, crime. Vin Diesel, action and thriller. And so we can see that certain actors seemingly do belong in certain genres. And this is continued on for directors and producers as well. Do consumers have an expectation of what genres celebrities best fit in? Here, we're looking at directors and producers. So we can see here Spielberg, science, action, thriller, mystery, and fantasy. Judd Apatow, comedy, romance, animation. So, does genre frequency and celebrity familiarity impact consumers seeing a select movie? If so, how? So what we can see here is I looked at a few things. I looked at several movies here, and I looked at it across actors, directors, and producers. So Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., Emma Stone, J.J. Abrams, Chris Pratt, Vin Diesel. And what I have at the top are the movies that are under investigation here. To the left-hand side of the chart, we can see phrases like superhero frequency, romance frequency, sci-fi frequency. These are the frequencies with which consumers view movies. Below, I have a list of the creatives on this chart. Familiarity with Chris Evans, familiarity with Robert Downey Jr. Now, what we can see here is, yes, largely the amount of movies you see in a particular genre and familiarity with the actor, with the creative, is very, very predictive. And we can see the little asterisks next to the numbers. This is very, very important. You'll see below here a big R squared. This is the amount or the percentage of predictability from these variables in predicting the dependent variable, in predicting seeing Captain America or seeing La La Land. As Emma Stone here, I have in La La Land. So it means that superhero frequency, Chris Evans' familiarity, predicts 20% of the reason why frequent movie consumers saw Captain America. That's the way to kind of understand this. So we can see from 20% down to 9%, we're able to predict quite a chunk of what's going on here. However, when I added this section, genre fit here didn't seem to be predictive. So let me back up. We have genre frequency, celebrity familiarity, or creative familiarity. We have here genre frequency. I still have my celebrity familiarity. Now I've added fit. Does Chris Evans fit into superhero genre? Does Robert Downey Jr. fit into superhero genre? Does Emma Stone fit into romance? Does J.J. Abrams fit into science fiction? Now what you'll see here is, aside from Chris Evans fitting, which is statistically significant and a strong predictor, we don't really see that anywhere else here. In fact, we don't see much of a change here among the R-squareds. And so what we can determine here is that we have a lot of predictability in ensuring that people have seen the genre before. You're likely to see Captain America: Civil War if you've seen this, if you watch superhero movies, and if you watch Chris Evans. But the same thing goes for Robert Downey Jr., Emma Stone, J.J. Abrams, Chris Pratt, and Vin Diesel. And granted, this is a limited list. But what you'll see here is that genre fit isn't really predictive. So in other words, it may very well be that people don't really care about whether or not a celebrity fits into a genre. It's more about being familiar with the creative and loving the genre. Yes, I love Chris Evans, and he's going to be in a new science fiction movie. I love science fiction. Awesome. I may not be worried as much about whether or not Chris Evans fits into science fiction. It may not matter to me as a consumer. Ingredient branding theory is furthered here, as celebrities do fit in movies, and familiarity with these creatives impacts likelihood to see the movie. Creative brand familiarity and genre frequency were predictive in consumer movie consumption, and it may inform future negotiations when we think about salary here. There are absolutely ideal combinations of creatives across directors, producers, and actors. Conceptually, consumers consider previous familiarity with directors and characters, though this has low predictive power. Oddly, creative genre fit did not have an impact on consumer movie consumption. And so here we have future implications and limitations. We can see that there was a high movie frequency consumer population or sampled population in the study. That's limited. If I had to do this study again, I would likely look at a wider sample and look at all movie consumers. I only looked at the US population, and it was, based around select creatives in study and in a time period. Amy Adams was hot a few years ago. She may not be as hot now. That goes the same for Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Pratt. A lot of these leading men and women rotate, and sometimes they go through periods of not decline, but not producing as many movies or being involved in as many movies. And so to kind of employ this study, it's important to do this regularly. Future follow-ups and implications: can different creative combinations tarnish movie brand images? I think that that's really, really interesting. Can you have a bad cake from good ingredients? If you have an Adam Driver and a Jennifer Lawrence and a Bradley Cooper and an Amy Adams and Chris Nolan or J.J. Abrams or anybody else with a star-studded cast and creatives above the line and below the line who are extremely, extremely powerful, can you create a bad movie? And can that movie be tarnished? Do certain creative combinations have stronger longevity to push sequels more than others? Are there certain people who are really made and built for sequels? If we think about the next Batman and we think about, Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson made his bread and butter on Twilight. That was his claim to fame a decade ago that really thrusted him into the spotlight. He is somebody who clearly can carry a sequel and can carry, a series of movies. Are there certain creatives who are better at that than others? And is that something to consider from a financial perspective when we're thinking about how do we pair creatives together for the long haul? You'll see here that there are a plethora of different questions that can be asked here. In the last study, we looked at how consumer variables can predict them viewing movies on multiple devices and on multiple platforms. Here, this particular study looked at, well, once we get to the movie theater, which movie are we picking? And how do we determine which movie we're going to pick? And do these creatives really warrant the exuberant salaries that they've earned? If they are responsible for 10% or 15% of why people come, and the movie winds up costing maybe $100 million, it could very well be that particular movie may pay them, $15 million if they are 15% responsible from creating, from drawing people to the box office. So it's really, really interesting to kind of think about how we can predict this and how we can look at movie theater sales and box office, and how we can also look at creative contracts in the future. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.